everyone. Welcome to Candid Conversations with Rennu Dhillon, a Building Women-Powered initiative, empowering women everywhere. What is Candid Conversations? Well, let's begin with the word candid. Candid means frank, truthful, and honest. What does conversation mean? Conversation means when two people get together and have a chat, exchanging informal ideas, or sharing experiences and stories. So when you bring those together, you have Candid Conversations with Rennu Dhillon, and that's me. Welcome to the show. Every woman has a unique life experience to share. It could be personal or professional. By sharing your story on this platform, on this show, which is Candid Conversations, you will find your voice, which in turn will inspire other women to find their voice too. By sharing these personal stories on our show, which are unfiltered, uncensored, straight from the heart, women will empower other women to make incredible things happen. My goal is to empower you, you empower me, and we empower women everywhere. I want every girl and woman to know that her voice can and will change the world. So if you know a woman that has a story to share or a personal experience which you know is truly empowering, then please contact me, and my information is on the screen. Marilyn Monroe said, "Give a girl the right pair of shoes and she can conquer the world." I say give a woman a voice and she will conquer anything and everything. After all, a woman is a full circle. She has the ability and the power to create, to nurture, and transform. So let our voices be the revolution for change. Please bring your empowering life experiences on this show so we can share it with women globally and they can be inspired to do what you have done. Enjoy the show. Today's show will feature two empowered women who are actively involved in a program called Freedom Forward here in San Francisco. Freedom Forward is a family-based foster care. It puts forth a new model of shared caregiving that was specifically designed to support youth who have experienced or are at risk of commercial sexual exploitation and families who care for them. FAM, which is what the program is, builds on promising practices from models around the country and was informed by local youth, caregivers, providers, and policymakers to ensure it meets San Francisco's particular needs. However, launching a foster care program during COVID-19 pandemic has proved very challenging, especially when it comes to identifying foster families to join the program called FAM. They recently produced a public service announcement about the commercial sexual exploitation of children in the Bay Area and the critical need for families, loving families, to support impacted youth in foster care. Our guests today are Bindu Oomme-Fernandes and Camille Bailey. Bindu Oomme-Fernandes, not only is she a personal friend, but she's also the executive director of Freedom Forward, a San Francisco nonprofit with a mission to end the commercial sexual exploitation of youth by transforming the systems that contribute to that exploitation. Prior to joining Freedom Forward, Bindu has served as the executive director at Narika, which is a Bay Area nonprofit that offers wraparound programs for survivors of gender-based violence. Bindu has a deep background in technology, leading equity inclusion, and corporate responsibility programs at Google for many years. Our second guest is Camille Bailey, who is a director at the FAM initiative of Freedom Forward. She's a multifaceted advocate with over a decade of experience working with and for system-involved youth and families in a variety of foster care settings. Camille is a licensed clinical social worker who blends her clinical background with policy and program designed to uplift the voices of young people and transform our foster care. Let's begin the show and meet these two powerful, empowering women that are truly making a difference in the community.
Every day, young people are trafficked for sex right here in the Bay Area. Many of them are youth in foster care. How do you break free if you have nowhere to go, no one to turn to? For these children, it can feel like every door is closed. but it doesn't have to be that way. At FAM, we're building a new model of foster care with shared caregiving, one that provides an open door to youth in need and more support for families who care for them. You can open your door to a place called home, a family to belong to, a community of support. You can provide an open door and be the difference. Join us. Join FAM.
Well, hello, ladies, and welcome to our show. Welcome, Bindu. Welcome, Camille. It's a pleasure to have you on Candid Conversations.
Thank you for inviting us.
So I know I'm going to have both of you here. So whoever wants to chip in and answer the questions, feel free to do that. And what I'm going to try and do with my little Zoom expertise here is I'll try and pin you so that when you're speaking, we'll have you on the screen. Yeah, and if I do a little goof ups, that's okay. I'm still learning Zoom. But welcome to the show. So I was very intrigued to learn about this organization, Freedom Forward. And I think, in at least the shows that I've done, we talk about domestic violence to women, men, and never really heard that much or too much about commercial sexual exploitation. So maybe I pose my first question to Camille. Could you explain what that is? Because that sounds pretty intense, and especially if it's for children and youth.
Yeah. So commercial sexual exploitation of children, the acronym that we use is CSEC, to stand for Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, is a fancy way of saying selling children for sex. So it's the exchange of something of value. It could be money, it could be food, it could be a place to stay, for the opportunity to either engage in or witness a sex act involving a child. So a lot of people have heard the phrase child sex trafficking, but this does not have to mean crossing state lines. It doesn't necessarily mean you're being kidnapped or even physically forced. If a child is sold for sex, it's always illegal. It's always rape. Children cannot consent. And this happens in a lot of different ways. We can see it on the street through street solicitation, similar to sex work that adults might engage in. Sometimes ads are posted online, and that's where buyers are getting in touch with the exploiter to arrange a meeting, maybe in a hotel or some other location. Child porn is also considered a form of CSEC because you're, buying the opportunity to witness a child engaging in a sex act. And then it also happens more informally, let's say, between, maybe family members, or a boyfriend asks his girlfriend to have sex with his friends for money. That is all considered commercial sexual exploitation. So it's a pretty broad topic, but it's not a happy one, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, what's the difference between, you talked about people buying children to have sex or to watch sex. So that we're not talking about prostitution. That's completely different, right?
Yeah. So children cannot be prostitutes because they cannot consent to having sex with an adult. And actually, in the state of California, not as long ago as it should be, we actually passed a law that says children cannot be charged with prostitution. They are to be seen as a victim of child abuse. This is a crime that is being committed against them, even if they appear so-called willing. There's a lot of grooming and coercion, and there's just undoubtedly there's a power imbalance there. There's an adult asking a child to do something. So they cannot consent legally or, ethically and morally. It's not seen as a consensual sex work or prostitution. No.
And you mentioned that kids are not being moved across borders. So you're based in San Francisco. So you're telling me something like this is happening right in our backyard in San Francisco?
Absolutely. San Francisco and the greater Bay Area are actually one of the highest intensity areas in America for this kind of trafficking. It is not just a thing that happens in faraway countries or, urban areas or rural areas. It happens everywhere, and it is very, very common here in the Bay Area.
So my question, Bindu, is what ages are we talking about? I mean, and are these children who are staying at home with their families, or are these kids who are in foster care?
Yeah, so the age can be 18 and under. At this point, I think another thing to remember about commercial sexual exploitation is that it can impact anyone, just similar to so many other social issues like domestic violence, sexual assault. There is an overlap with commercial sexual exploitation and things like foster care, things like the fact that this affects youth of color, youth that identify as LGBTQIA, etc. So it can affect all youth, but disproportionately will affect youth of color, LGBTQIA youth, and youth in foster care as well. The average age of entry to this is around 12 years, but there is no minimum age. Really, it can affect and does affect any child.
Wow. I mean, I'm just shocked just listening to it. It's just shocking that something like this is even happening. So how can one identify that this is happening to a young person? Whichever one of you would like to take that question. Sure. How can you identify this happening to a child? Because sometimes children don't talk about stuff,
Right. Yeah, and many young people who are experiencing exploitation don't identify as a victim. They're not going to come to you and say, hey, I was just exploited. That's not the language that they use for what's happening to them. So the biggest tips that we have for people for identifying this is to really recognize the signs of grooming. Grooming on average goes on for multiple years before the actual exploitation of selling that child for sex actually occurs. So often that's, a young person who has a really older partner, a boyfriend who's in their 20s or older when they themselves are a teenager or a child. Often that relationship might look really controlling. They might, be limiting who that youth can talk to or where they can be. They have to be in touch all the time. So if the young person is being really secretive or isolating from friends and family. And then the other big part of grooming is a lot of exploiters are buying this child's love and affection. So they're going to shower them with gifts. So if a young person has things that are not in line with their personal circumstances, all of a sudden they have a fancy cell phone or brand new shoes, or their hair and their nails are done and that's never been something that they've done before. That might be things to, be curious about and explore. And then the other big one is travel. If they're going away for weekend trips, saying, oh, I'm going to be in a music video, or, oh, I'm invited to this hotel party, that's a pretty big red flag. Sex trafficking and exploitation doesn't have to include moving around, but it often does. Young people are brought from one city to another and then back because that reduces the risk of getting caught by law enforcement and just makes it trickier to catch. So those are some of the big evidences that grooming is happening. And then when go ahead.
No, go ahead.
When actual exploitation starts happening, that's when we might see changes in health, frequent STIs, lots of pregnancy testing, or abortions. Maybe they have injuries that, they can't really explain where they came from. You might see changes in drug use. A lot of exploiters will actually get youth hooked on meth as a way to keep them coming back because that addiction is driving it. And then on the alternative, many young people and adults, we use substances to cope. So if you have this experience that's happening, you can't make sense to it, you don't like it, you're confused, you might be turning to marijuana, alcohol, other drugs as a way to cope with that experience.
And Bindu, do you think access now to the internet, and when young people have access to internet and so many other, apps and things like that, do you think this is increased because of that, or was it already happening before?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it just accelerates a lot of what can happen because previously there are more controls and systems in place and you were chaperoned by your parents, but now that isn't a thing anymore. There's so much access to the online world and just access to internet and phone, etc. A lot of what you're sharing also brings up back to the question on how do you see flags. Some of the things that might exhibit with our young people is having a lot more secretive habits around their phone and their devices. So suddenly you might be observing new apps on their phone, or they won't show you their phone. They're clutching to their phone and won't give it up. Or things like messaging apps and public profiles. These are all important things to think about with our young people, knowing that it just opens the door to a lot more access and just access between, other adults who probably shouldn't be speaking to that young person.
This leads me to, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I saw a news special actually about when you have a public profile as a minor, adult men are contacting these profiles in like less than a minute. They are flooded with messages, and some of them might be innocent and some of them are not, right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So parents, I think, really need to be mindful on having their children have private profiles, only be friends with people you actually know, don't share your address or personal information. Have these conversations up front before it becomes a problem. I think it boils down to conversations with your children, and I always talk about that, being an educator, even an early educator. I tell parents, I grew up in an environment where the word sex, are you kidding me? I don't even think I heard about that until I was in my 20s. It was a taboo word. Mm-hmm. And, boyfriends was another issue in itself. And I think it's sad because, we can't raise our kids all overprotective and be that helicopter parent that's just hovering around them. There's one argument that says let them experience life, but at the same time, there have to be limits to what you're going to experience. But I think communication and talking about things is so important. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Even bringing up, coming from a space of curiosity with our young people is also helpful, rather than the defensive, what are you doing? Where were you? What's going on? Mm-hmm. Just being more curious about their relationships, bringing up issues around commercial sexual exploitation in ways that our children and our youth can hear, so that they're starting to be aware of potential signs that they may be experiencing and have not put a label to in many ways.
So this brings me to Freedom Forward. Let's talk about what amazing work both you young ladies are doing, and tell us a little bit about Freedom Forward and what your projects are, and what is it that our listeners need to educate themselves on?
Absolutely. So at Freedom Forward, our mission is to transform the public systems that contribute to sexual exploitation of youth. So as we've talked before, Rennu, you know that in California, the majority of the youth who experience trafficking of this sort also have experienced foster care. I believe the statistics say around 60 to 80% of the youth who've experienced exploitation have some involvement in the child welfare system. And so at Freedom Forward, we realized that this intersection of sex trafficking and systems and foster care is where we can make the best difference. So the exciting part about Freedom Forward is we're committed to making systemic changes and to be this incubator where we test out new initiatives and test out new systems changes and share our learnings, the good, the bad, the ugly, with the world as well, just in hopes that it changes the landscape of sexual exploitation, like worldwide.
So you're a nonprofit. So are you finding foster care for children that have experienced this, or what exactly do you do?
Yeah. So we have several initiatives, and one of them is our FAM pilot, and FAM stands for Family and Me. And it is a foster care pilot program right here in the Bay Area. And it is specifically designed to support young people who are either at risk of exploitation or have in fact experienced exploitation. Okay. And, we did a lot of research from the community here, talking to youth themselves, foster parents, practitioners, policy advocates, really trying to inform our model and make sure that it would actually meet the needs of this population. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got is that foster parents feel unprepared to support this population in particular. And when they do have a young person in their care, they feel really isolated and alone. So FAM is trying to pilot a new model of shared caregiving. So we're actually trying to connect each young person with not one, but two family homes that work together and are really replicating what extended family might look like outside of the system. Mm-hmm. So the primary caregiver is, the main traditional foster home, where that's where the youth primarily lives. And then this secondary caregiver is someone who supports that family, comes over for dinner weekly, movie nights, is a present face and someone who both the youth and the caregivers feel comfortable with. And they have their own home with a bedroom available for the young person to go. And that could be, a planned weekend, we're going to do a sleepover, or it could be in a moment of crisis. Maybe, these are teenagers. Teenagers are by definition hormonal, and, might have mood swings and things, even outside of trauma and foster care. So if a young person gets upset and, needs to take a break from their primary caregiver, they now have somewhere safe to go as an alternative instead of running away or even just going for a walk. Exploiters are literally prowling our streets and they are looking for unaccompanied minors. I used to run a group home for this population, and we would have exploiters parked down the street, just waiting for our youth to walk to the bus stop. BART and public transit is another major recruitment area because a lot of young people who are, don't have the finances to have their own car. Many young people who are system involved are given BART passes, and it's just a known association with vulnerability, and they will ride around on the bus or the BART until they see a young person. And in one instance, I had an exploiter try to stage it as kind of a meet cute. He got off on the same stop as a teen, and tried to make, look at this coincidence, we both got off on the same stop, and tried to start engaging her. But luckily, she and I had many conversations about how foster youth can be vulnerable and targeted by exploiters, and so she recognized it right away, and we talked about it, and she was really proud of herself that she was able to get out of that situation and not engage any further with this man who was trying to follow her home, offering her a ride, all these things.
So, as someone listening to, if I was a family there and you were approaching me for foster care, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I would also be very concerned that, oh my gosh, I'm getting a teenager. We all know how teenagers can be, right? I'm so glad I'm not dealing with that age group. It's a nightmare. 12 to 18, they hate all the adults around them. So that's your own kids. You battle with your own children about simple things like a cell phone. So how do you educate a foster parent to deal with a child that's not even their own, who's coming into their home?
It can be really difficult because you're not the biological parent, and you have to respect that even though this young person is in foster care, they do still have biological family who they probably love and are still in touch with and want to return to. So being a foster parent is incredibly difficult. I am in awe and appreciate all of the people who are foster parents across our system, because it is not easy work for exactly what you were just describing. It's a lot of conversations and curiosity. An authoritarian model is just going to push these young people away. And unfortunately, when you're a foster kid, that looks like running away. And then that placement is ended and you are struggling out in the world on your own, or the system is trying to figure out what to do with you. So my advice to foster parents is to be open and curious, try to have as many conversations on the front end before there's a problem, check in daily, ask how they're doing, create safety plans together, expect that crisis is going to happen and plan together how you can get through that together. Literally asking, what can I do when I'm pissing you off? Do you need space? Do you want to talk about it? Should we put on a funny video? Should we do a silly dance? Obviously you want to be developmentally appropriate depending on the age of the young person, but making these agreements beforehand so that in the moment when there's a crisis, you can say, oh, wait a minute, we're getting upset. We agreed that when we're upset, we're going to take 5 minutes apart. So I'm setting the timer and let's come back. So that demonstrates that you listen, you care, and you're respecting their boundaries. And in turn, maybe they'll respect yours as well.
And just to add, Rennu, within the FAM initiative that Freedom Forward and our collaborative is doing, there's also a lot more additional supports for the family as well. So I know their team is like our team has trainings on commercial sexual exploitation that our partners do, so that the foster parents feel more comfortable understanding the signs, how to support. There are monthly groups that our caregivers are a part of. There's a lot of wraparound services as well, because we recognize this as a constant feedback that our caregivers have given us. Our foster parents have told us, this is impossible, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Help me be a better foster parent for my child as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we really try to surround everybody with a team of support. And first and foremost, that secondary caregiver, how nice is it to have someone that you can pick up the phone and call and vent to, so that that energy can get out and not directed to the young person?
Yeah, and the beauty of that model is that it goes back to the "it takes a village" model, right? Like it's simplistic for us to think that it just takes a family and to raise a child. Of course, it takes a village, and so the FAM model leans heavily on it, saying, "Hey, we need a support system. We need an ecosystem around this family, because it isn't just a family that takes care of a child. It's a village."
And when you take a child away from a situation where they've been exploited, how do you stop the exploiters from finding their child again?
That is really, really difficult.
It is, right?
Yeah, because they are relentless.
Yes.
And
that's what I was thinking, is once they've got to know the child, they'll do what it takes.
Yeah, and often there is what's called a trauma bond between those two. So the youth themselves might return to the exploiter, seemingly willingly.
Right.
So really our best bet is to try to create an environment that is a desirable alternative. So meeting young people's needs, making sure that they are fed, they are clothed, that if they feel good about how they are presenting themselves in the world, so that they're not vulnerable to someone who's offering these things that they don't have access to. So in our program, actually, we have a ton of discretionary funds set aside specifically to make sure that young people feel taken care of. We will pay for summer camp, horseback riding lessons. If you want to get your nails done for prom, so be it. We will make sure that you have no reason to be turning to an exploiter to cover costs of something that youth outside the system generally have access to.
So I'm sure, being a nonprofit, you both are doing an amazing job, but funds, right? People need money to run organizations and other kinds of support. So what exactly does Freedom Forward need from the community to continue doing the amazing work that you guys are doing?
I can start, and Camille, feel free to add on. Donations are always welcome. It helps Freedom Forward and our collaborative of various partners continue to do the work that we're doing. You're absolutely right. The reality that money makes the world go around. And so any amount, small or big, is a commitment to continue to serve locally the youth and the families they're experiencing a lot of these issues. The additional thing I will share is that we definitely are always looking for supplies. The Freedom Forward has a hype center. This is a youth drop-in center where young people can come into the center and they can access any of our services. We have a lot of our partners on site. It's meant to be a drop-in one-stop shop for our youth. So it has our legal providers, it has our therapy providers, it has a lot of other providers for young people to come in and use these services. And how the community can help is to bring in a lot of the supplies that our young people ask us for. So our young people are asking us for shampoo and conditioner and toothpaste and pregnancy tests and contraceptives, a ton of stuff. And all of these supplies, if we continue to stock the Hype Center with the donations from our communities, it is something that we can continue to run. We have a laundry on site. These are also things that we're always welcoming, laundry detergent and other such supplies, just to keep it open and running, including food, just for our Hype Center as well.
Basically, the day-to-day toiletries and supplies that everybody would need on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. We also just launched a public service announcement about the FAM project and the FAM initiative that Camille was sharing. And so we'd love to share that PSA video with you, Rennu, and if you can share it with our community,
Yes,
it's
we'd love
something
to do
we'd
that.
love to just have everyone reshare and just watch. It's a 1-minute PSA video, but it really kind of hones in on this idea of it's happening right here. And if we're all pretending it isn't happening, or if we all think it doesn't happen, it continues to thrive in the silence or the ignorance or the denial of an issue like this. And so sharing that PSA and just using that as an opportunity to communicate and chat with someone about this is something that the community can do to help as well.
And I'm sure just listening to this, the teenager, the middle school and high school age is the most, critical age group. So I'm sure these exploiters are hanging around high schools and middle schools, because you see kids walking home or walking to the park or chatting. And I mean, that would be, if I was thinking like that, that would be the easiest target. So parents should be very aware of something like this. When the kids are heading home and asking them, who did you speak to? Who did you see? I think that's just so important. I go back to when I used to pick up my kids from high school, and, it was funny. I was not growing up here. I didn't know about so much of this stuff. And my younger one used to always tell me, oh, you see that person across the street? That's what he said to the girls. And I'd be like shocked. And what is he doing standing outside the school? But you can't stop them. They stand outside the school. They don't go into the school grounds. So, yeah. Camille? In closing, what would you like to finish off with the Freedom Forward? And absolutely, we'd love to have your public service announcement. We can even play it on this show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like Bindu said, we are really just trying to spread awareness about this issue, really trying to start conversations like these, because so many people here in the Bay Area are just unaware that this exploitation is happening right here to our own children within our community. So spreading that awareness, if folks work in customer-facing organizations, seek out a training for your team so that you can recognize and intervene if you see something like this happening. At FAM, we are building FAM placements for our young people. We're engaging with currently 7 youth, but there's many more where that came from, who are needing FAM homes. So we are strongly encouraging folks, especially those who have previous or current foster parenting experience, to consider joining FAM as a primary or secondary caregiver. We also are recruiting from the community, and then we also use a permanency model to look into the existing relationships that young people have. Similar to CSEC being under the radar, a lot of people have a relationship with a young person and don't realize that that young person is a foster youth. It's considered private information that's not publicly shared. But often there are folks within a youth's own circle of support who would willingly step up, but no one has ever asked them. So that's another network that we're trying to tap into as well. So I think our general call to the community is to raise awareness about exploitation, raise awareness about foster care and foster youth and how common it is, and that you might think you don't know anyone in care, but you probably do.
But ladies, all I can tell you is this has been so informative. I mean, I didn't even know half of the stuff that was going on. And, we all think that we know what's happening. And also I would probably say that many of us say, well, this is never going to happen to me, so why do I need to worry? You just never know what's going to happen. And our children nowadays are exposed to too much with the cell phone. So we need to be very careful. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have both of you on the show. And I really hope that our show will make a difference of some sort, and people will reach out to you to provide you the support in terms of supplies or money or whatever it may be.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Rennu. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and I'm sure your eyes have opened as much as mine have about this critical issue, which is commercial sexual exploitation of young children and youth. For those who may not realize, here are some statistics. On any given day in 2016, an estimated 40.3 million people were victims of modern slavery. 4.8 million of them were forced into sexual exploitation. Over 1 million of those in forced exploitation are children. During a 1-year period in the United States, 16% of youth between the ages of 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. Over the course of a lifetime, 28% of the youth in the United States between the ages of 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. Children are most vulnerable in commercial sexual exploitation between the ages of 7 and 13. These are truly sad statistics, and to imagine that this is going on right now. Therefore, it is very important that we educate ourselves on this critical problem that is affecting our society and truly affecting our children and youth. Remember one thing, abuse is never contained to a present moment. It will actually linger across a person's lifetime with some truly deep ramifications. These ramifications will be long-term. Remember, we can deny our experience, but our body will always remember this. I really hope you will support the program called Freedom Forward. Do visit the website, the information is on the screen, and I'll see you at the next show with some more empowering stories. Thank you. Have a great week.
Every day, young people are trafficked for sex right here in the Bay Area. Many of them are youth in foster care. How do you break free if you have nowhere to go? No one to turn to. For these children, it can feel like every door is closed, but it doesn't have to be that way. At FAM, we're building a new model of foster care with shared caregiving, one that provides an open door to youth in need and more support for families who care for them. You can open your door to a place called home, a family to belong to, a community of support. You can provide an open door and be the difference. Join us. Join FAM.